5 hosts, 4 divisions, all battling it out for the Holy Grail of the American Hockey League, the Calder Cup. This is the Holy Grail Podcast. Here are your hosts, Jeremy Paul, Zack Power, Andrew Rinaldi, Corey Swartz, and Dina Weinheimer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 41 of Field Pass Hockey's AHL podcast, The Holy Grail. To kick off the show and to get you acclimated with our voices and faces, well, I have just one question. What is the go-to snack at an AHL game? Gotta know. Corey, what's your go-to?
Oh, man, the Giant Center, whenever they change their soft pretzels a little bit, I'm usually the first one to know about it. So I am all about that soft pretzel life, to be honest with you.
That's a good one. Without a doubt. I have to say, I was probably going to go soft pretzel, but now I think I have to switch it up because I feel like I can't double dip. So I'm going to keep it salty, too. I'm going to go with popcorn. You can't go wrong with popcorn. And if you're of age in either Canada or the United States, that pairs pretty well with a nice adult beverage. So I'm going to go with a really salty, terrible for you popcorn.
In St. John's, they have this thing called dressing, which is like breadcrumbs on top of French fries on top of gravy. So it's like a heart attack on a plate, but you know what? It's traditional Newfoundland food, and you know what? It's great, and that's what I'm going to go with on this week's episode.
So what I'm hearing you say is that I need to make a trip because that sounds...
Definitely. I will have you there anytime.
That sounds excellent to me. Well, folks, as we often do whenever we record an episode, we have got some breaking news, and that is that Logan Shaw was named the AHL Player of the Week. He's putting a cherry on top of his monstrous week after he put up 9 points in 3 games, scoring a whopping 5 goals and picking up 4 assists. And Zach, I won't steal too much of your thunder because I know you're going to talk about it a little bit more, but what a week for the kid.
And you know what? It's part of an overall thing with the Marlies. I was kind of thinking about this when I was watching the game, and unfortunately I wasn't able to kind of write about it, but I did have a lot of thoughts on it. And, you know, when I talked about this in my season primer, and that this kid is able to bring a level of experience that a lot of these teams beg to have. Right. And, you know, when you kind of have that, you have that seeing eye pass, you know where the pass is going to be able to go on the ice. The American Hockey League is such a developmental league, but when you have someone with experience who can kind of pass the puck, Alex Galchenyuk was a great example of it last year. And this year is Shaw. And when you have that experience, they know how to move the puck around the ice. And you know what? Good on him for doing that this week. A killer week for him, and definitely well deserved.
Yeah, Logan Shaw looking dangerous this week without a doubt. And speaking of dangerous, not a very fortunate segue that I'm making here into this one, but hey, when the universe provides it, the universe provides it. And that is that the AHL Player Safety Committee announced that Colorado Eagles defenseman Mitch Vande Sompel has been suspended for 3 games after a scary hit on Austin Wagner of the Ontario Reign. So Vande Sompel was issued a 5-minute major for elbowing and a game misconduct in that one against the Reign, and he's going to miss matchups against Texas and San Jose this week and into the weekend before he's able to return to the ice. Guys, a scary hit against the boards there, in that one, and obviously a tough scene there.
Yeah, definitely. I do remember, it's going to haunt me a little bit here, but I believe that Vande Sompel used to play, I believe, up in the Atlantic Division, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to have to go back to look at that. I know the name for sure. And you hate to see these kinds of plays happen. It's very, for sure, to, cost the team. We talked about it a couple of times with other suspensions here that, it's the right length of a suspension, don't think that there's necessarily reputation there or anything like that, but, got to do what you got to do to send the message. I agree.
Good, Corey. Good catch there because, yeah, he's former Bridgeport Islander and also before that a Bridgeport Sound Tiger. So we'll forever know him as a Sound Tiger because why wouldn't we here at the Holy Grail? But yeah, I mean, he's not somebody who's found his way into the box much. I mean, in 2018-19, he played in 70 games and only picked up 28 penalty minutes. So this isn't a player that's known for picking up a game misconduct here and there. This is a pretty uncharted waters for the guy.
Again, we kind of talked about it last week too, but these kind of players get in the heat of the moment, right? And I don't know what it is, what's going on in Colorado. Like, they just feel that, anytime the team enters the ice, we got to get a couple of suspensions going. But, it's, again, the heat of the moment. It's the altitude for sure.
Yeah, it seems like that kind of a season for the Eagles without a doubt. And somebody's got to step into that role. If you've got the Wild and you've got McLeod out there, no longer there, somebody's got to fill in the void of issuing out a game misconduct or a suspension here and there without a doubt.
For sure. And I do want to get a quick word in before we get to the swipe segment. The AHL and ECHL has been just full of success stories. Another one of those is Keith Petruzzelli on the Toronto Marlies, who had been rocking it through the first 6 games, going 6-0. Funny enough, a year ago, he was playing in a practice minor league hockey rink. 1,000 fans were in attendance because the Growlers didn't have a rink, and things weren't looking so great. And you know what? He's got his AHL call-up and then his NHL call-up and the contract. And I just want to say good on him. From ECHL to NHL, for the Maple Leafs, it's not ideal to have your 3rd and 5th goaltenders leading the way. But you know what? They're doing a great job in doing so. And congrats on him.
Moments like that kind of make you wonder. Maybe not exactly the same exact trajectory, but you think about Alex Nedeljkovic back in a few years ago in Carolina, kind of had a similar path and ended up finding his way into a deal in Carolina after a handful of injuries. And man, he stole the net. And so this is the kind of thing where Maple Leafs fans don't get too excited necessarily, but you never know what can happen in a situation like this. Goalies are finicky, right? And all it takes is a quick streak to turn an ECHL kid into the starting goaltender for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
And you know what? Michael Hellebuck is a name that kind of comes to mind, coming in last minute, and the Hutchinson duo, the kind of two of them. Hutchinson actually got called up in the Calder Cup finals, and late in the season, and then led the Ice Caps to the Calder Cup finals before heading to Winnipeg. So you know what? It all takes is a bit of time, and a bit of camera time in the NHL definitely doesn't hurt.
No, it certainly does not, and he might end up finding his way onto the ice. So we'll see how that one goes. We'll follow that closely without a doubt. And folks, it's time to get into the segment that we all know you come here for. It has to be, and that is our beloved swipe left or swipe right. Now, as you all see, we are down a couple of members of our team, so we don't have as many of these takes for you today, but I think they're pretty great. So we've definitely got some good ones. Corey, I'll throw it to you to start first. What is your hot take, and are Zach and I going to swipe right or left on it?
So I was watching the Philadelphia Flyers and the Toronto Maple Leafs the other day, and this popped into my mind. I've never thought of it before. But at one point in this game, the Maple Leafs scored this goal, and it was a result of Felix Sandstrom, the goaltender of the game, losing his skate blade in the middle of play. And as rare as that is, it kind of begged the question for me, should that be among, other pieces of the goaltender's equipment that you consider to blow the play dead on type of thing? Because it's an interesting situation. It doesn't quite impact safety like a helmet would, but it's not quite in the same category as, a stick, in that you can play without a stick. It may impact, and you could say, okay, that causes might have been a cause for a goal against here or there type of thing. But my kind of thought is, I feel like this is just in a slightly different category than any of those other kinds of things. It really got my brain thinking about it. I think kind of at the end of the day, if that happens and it's noticed in time, and of course this was not noticed in time, but I'd blow the play dead if it were me. That's just my opinion, though.
And you know what? I'm going to swipe right on this because I really like the concept. As soon as you mentioned this, the first name that kind of came to mind was Tuukka Rask. And that whole ordeal with Tampa Bay in the Eastern Conference Finals a couple of years ago. The thing is with the skate blade, it doesn't necessarily stand out so much when it's lying flat on the ice. right? And goaltenders use this so much to kind of push off of. My worry is, and they kind of, there's so much traffic in front of the net nowadays too, that when the goaltender trips up, God knows what's going to happen while he's down on the ice or whatever, right? And that's where I kind of think of it. It's hard. If the referee can spot it, I'm all for it. But you know what? There's a million and one things going on in the referee's mind. And I think that it's going to be hard to see it, but I do like it on paper, and that's why I'll go for it.
Yeah, I mean, at first when you started it, Corey, I thought maybe that this was a potential one of those hot takes that like can open a floodgate of other questions of like, okay, well, like thinking about like forwards and defensemen, like when is that like when you like, and so at first I was like, maybe I'm gonna swipe left, but the more, especially like Zach, hearing you discuss it too, like I almost wonder how much of it is potentially actually a safety concern, right? Like, I think about just even like last night as we're recording this on a Wednesday, thinking through what happened to Evander Kane in a really freak accident in a play with Pat Maroon, right, where a skate blade can be really damaging. And when you're down in the crease, right, and you've got a skate blade there and you get things get dirty down there, right? Like people are falling to the ice, people are getting shoved to the ice, and depending on how the skate blade is out and exposed, maybe that is actually a risk for someone's safety and health. And so that, and also like if a goaltender is not aware that they've lost their blade and they try to push off to the other side, you could easily pull something and hurt yourself. Like I could absolutely see that. So I'm going to swipe right. I'm going to swipe right on it as well, Corey.
Somebody summed up that whole situation with Evander Kane yesterday pretty well. When I first saw it on Twitter, they said we sometimes forget that hockey players wear literal knives on the bottoms of their shoes in order to play hockey. So it is a different, that was difficult to watch. I think it's a fascinating debate because we don't really see, in this case with skate blades, that you don't really see those pop out too much. So, I had somebody on Twitter also say to me that, hey, it's an equipment issue, basically get better equipment type of thing, which I do understand to a certain degree there too, is the counter argument. But it's such a rare thing too. And that's particular. I don't think we've seen it affect a goal as much as that, at least in my recent memory. And of course it came into play on a Flyers goal against for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you almost could see that going the other way, right? Like if you're a forward and you're carrying the puck out of the zone and you blow a skate trying to get out of the zone and you have an odd man rush, sure, I could see that potentially leading to a goal. But more clearly, you're absolutely right. This one very clearly led to a goal when your goaltender doesn't have a skate. And so I good on you for that, noticing that, and I appreciate that hot take. So, for me, I'm gonna go ahead and go next, and I have to say I had the pleasure of being in Tampere, Finland this last weekend for the NHL's global series between the Colorado Avalanche and the Columbus Blue Jackets. And, it was an experience like no other, being able to watch fans in a country that have never gotten a chance to see an NHL game and watching the kids run around and just like chant Mikko Rantanen and Patrick Laine's name. I mean, it was just the coolest thing I think I've ever seen in my life. And so it got me thinking, we let those teams carry a few extra guys into those games just in case there's an injury or, maybe you need to throw somebody in goal so you're not having like a Finnish e-bug come in and try to save the day. And so it got me thinking, what if the NHL sent the team's AHL affiliates to the Global Series match and created an AHL-NHL doubleheader there and also kept the team from having to carry extra players into that matchup and being able to call up a player if need be while they're on the road?
Oh, I'd absolutely swipe right on this one for sure. I mean, we've seen it a couple of times, more so in like outdoor game type of situations where like an NHL team, they'll have a doubleheader with their AHL team or college teams or, whatever the case may be. I'm all for it. I think it's, again, growing the AHL as well as the NHL and kind of doing them in tandem. I think it's a fantastic idea. I'm all for it.
You know what? I'm kind of on the fence about it because I wonder about the draw, and it's got to be kind of done right. The atmosphere in Finland looked absolutely fantastic. But you know what? Let's get a couple exhibition games going here, right? Like, Finnish hockey, to an extent, it is very similar in skill-wise to the AHL, right? A lot of the players over there are former AHL grads. You'll be surprised. right? You think that you haven't seen a player in a while, you go over to Finland, right? But you know what? I'd like to kind of see a couple exhibition games on that side note as well. I don't know about the cost of it and, what the difference is, right? Because, I don't want to see you're doubling up because it's the same jet probably, but, they're not taking a United or an Air Canada jet over, right? Like they're taking their private plane. So it's and especially in a league where the AHL is just so bussy, it's kind of a step. But you know what? I'm all for it, right? Like let's go for the madness. So I will swipe right on that.
Yeah, not too many bus routes going from let's say Coachella Valley to Tampere, Finland. So that would be a little rough to coordinate without a doubt.
For sure. All right, folks. I do have a bit of beef, and I talked about this last year to a magnitude of beyond depths. Okay. There's a game on December 31st. Okay. Cleveland and Charlotte. Do you know what time this starts? Do you know what time this game starts? Oh, Jeremy knows. Jeremy knows what. Jeremy, tell me what time does that game start?
12:31.
Why? Why are we doing? We're not honoring anybody. I see no logical reason besides someone said, I bet that would be cool. I bet that would be cool. Well, guess what? We are not doing this. I have determined that we will not do this. No. We will not do this. I refuse, okay? I will ask you once again for your hand in the marriage of let's keep all games end with a 0. 12:30. How about 1:30 or 1 o'clock? We not 1:05, not 12:35. Why? Why do you do this? Besides staggering the games, why do you have to schedule it at that time? We are not doing this. Thank you. This is breaking news that should be noted.
Oh no, I have too much power with this little ticker that I have here. But I agree. It's just dumb. I mean, I'm all for staggering start times and trying to make it so that you're not trying to flip between all the different games on AHL TV and but you're not getting anywhere with a minute. And I bet money somebody watch with the timer. If that puck doesn't drop at exactly 12:31 on the dot, if that puck drops a minute earlier or a minute later, I don't even want to know how you'll react to it. I have to swipe right on it. It doesn't make sense.
But you know what? What gets me, and sorry, Corey, I'll get to you in a moment, but because I'm fired up, right? Is I'm all for staggering the games, and I really think that we should because we have about 17 games start at 7 Eastern. Great. Why don't we start a couple at 7:30, right? But you're not getting anywhere with that 5 minutes, right? What is someone going to flick over the game and watch for 5 minutes? No.
So, correct me if I'm wrong here. I feel a little bit out of the loop on this one. This is only because the game is starting at 12:31 specifically.
Yeah.
Okay, I just pulled it up on my schedule on my phone here, and it does say 12:31. I agree. I got to swipe right on it just because that's the most absurd start time I think I've ever seen for it to be specifically laid out for.
Is because it's 12:31 on 12:31.
Ah, okay, that makes sense then.
That's
funny,
unless there's something I don't know. Are they honoring somebody that night who wore 31? That's
not I know of, and I feel like I probably should at that point, right? But I don't know.
No.
The only thing that comes to mind is if it were like a TV game. I'm saying this just coming off of a game where, for Hershey, where they did 4:30 instead of 5 to, allow the channel that broadcasts the Bears games on television to fit in a football game beforehand. And should the World Series have gone to a Game 7, they would have been able to play that afterwards. I don't know what they may have replaced that with or not, but that's the only exception there. But that doesn't make sense. It just sounds like they did a funny gag that I don't think that really anybody appreciates. So I think I would easily swipe right on that for these shenanigans.
Do we think that maybe I need to Do you think that maybe I need to try to get in for an insider story on the decision to make that game a 12:31 start time? At first when I saw it, I have to be honest, we've all known that there have been many an issue over the years with the AHL app. And I use the AHL app to look at start times for things quite often. And so as I scrolled through, I was like, well, maybe just it got programmed wrong. Like maybe like it just got programmed to where but I just pulled up the Monsters schedule on the Monsters website, and it's 12:31 p.m. Eastern Standard Time start time. So I was giving too much credit where credit was not due.
But you know what? I was going through and I noticed it, and because I went through the full year's worth of schedules just to see what everyone was kind of doing, and I was like, oh, this is weird. And then it kept on going, and it dawned on me, I was like, why are we doing 12:31? Right? Like, no. We are not doing this. No.
Mm-hmm. I think we've got a 10.
I think I have his number here somewhere. I will give him a call and we'll figure it out.
Not a bad idea. Not a bad idea at all. I think we've got a 10:35 a.m. start time this week. And to me, I'm like, well, that's strange. But like 12:31 definitely takes the cake on strange without a doubt. So yeah, definitely not hot for the AHL to start games at 12:31. So it's like we've said before, it's Cleveland's league and we just live in it and we just kind of let them do what they want to do, and them and Hershey, and we call it a day. So but speaking of things that are hot, I think it's time to talk about some teams that are hot and some teams that are not. And man, we've got a litany of them. I think we've all got different teams, if I'm right about this. So we've got 6 teams here for the tops and the bottoms of the week. So Corey, who you've got? Who's hot? Who's not?
Well, mine kind of ties in with my game of the week, which is going to be coming along a little bit later here. But I got to give it up to the Bridgeport Islanders for very much surprising me so far in the early going this season. Their record reflects a lot of their success. They have 7 wins already, second place in the Atlantic Division. There's a lot to be happy with, but they have the most goals for in the entire AHL right now, which surprised me immensely to read that, just because, we looked at Bridgeport last season, they were extremely, challenged, to put it lightly, in terms of scoring. It was basically Chris Terry, and that's where the list of scorers kind of started and ended at. I'm trying to think. The rookie, I was Ruslan Ishkahov. Sorry, did not want to butcher that pronunciation. He's been leading the scoring, and of course, Chris Terry is up there with the best of them as it is. But it's not just him carrying pulling the rope this time. There's a lot more support for him, and it's kind of made for a surprising start to the season for Bridgeport for me, because I think they've kind of been a black ace in a sense, to, pull a playoff term there on that one, I guess. But, it surprised me how well they've done and just how they found scoring. Is it sustainable? That's going to be the question to ask going from here on out. But as for who's not, I got to keep picking on until I worked with Springfield. They kind of got their act together after I called them not. But, Hartford Wolfpack. I felt like they were going to have a bounce back season, but they were kind of a dark horse to me still in a lot of ways. But they just kind of keep struggling, and it's to the point where they've now taken the bottom spot in the entirety of the Atlantic Division, which is impressive in its own way. But not only that, but they're 31st. I guess I got to keep correcting myself. Second from the bottom in the AHL now. Only the Henderson Silver Knights have fewer points this season than the Hartford Wolfpack. And it's just, I might not have been expecting Hartford to, set the world on fire possibly, but it just kind of feels like that fallout from last season has certainly carried over into the new season and hasn't gone anywhere. It's been just a baffling funk to me, to be honest with you guys.
Yeah, and the thing about Hartford, obviously they end the season really, really weak last year, right? And you have to wonder if Hartford is falling victim in some ways to the way in which the Rangers have tried to develop their farm system and the way in which they've now harvested all of the goods from that farm system. You look at that Rangers lineup and it's hard to not find a former member of the Wolfpack. And so obviously spoils in New York, but man, things are a little tough in Hartford.
Corey, you've been following the Atlantic Division for quite some time, and not to get too far off topic, but I'm trying to think of a time in the past 10 years that we've seen a really competitive spirit from Hartford.
They've had a few seasons where they've gone further. I mean, the 2014-15 season comes to mind because I know they downed the Bears in. Oh man, I know I'm going to have a couple Bears listeners that are going to be upset at me for not remembering how many games. I want to say it was 6 or 7 games that season, and that was back before Chris Bork turned from the Hartford side back to the Hershey side, and I think that series was what kind of caused that. But had a deep run. I believe they got denied in the Eastern Conference Final that year, if I'm not mistaken. So that would have been the second round. I don't think they made it further than the conference finals, but I'd have to go fact check that one a little bit more just offhand. But they've had a couple of good teams. Obviously, it's been a long time since they've really been that team that's been in contention for the Calder Cup for at least, like you said, in the last 6 or 7 years easily. But, it felt like last season, like you said, Jeremy, I think it was really true that, they had a lot of talent from the Rangers there, and the Rangers have grabbed it. They've taken a lot of it. That doesn't mean that Hartford doesn't have anybody down there right now. It's still a pretty solid-looking group on paper. But it's just baffling to me that they've had a, hard time putting it together with a lot of the same personnel. And, obviously there's probably a bit of a step down, but one would think it wouldn't be enough to be quite this bad, at least this early in the season. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm still holding out for a turnaround at some point, but it's baffled me, honestly, this season so far.
Yeah, maybe just changing up the approach, starting slow and finishing strong this year might be the strategy in Hartford. But it looks like you were on to something there, Corey. 2015 was the year in which the Bears were defeated by the Wolfpack in the second round, and then the Wolfpack ended up being swept by the Manchester Monarchs.
That's right.
In the third round. And so that was their last playoff appearance as well. So 2014, 2015, the last playoff appearance for Hartford. Mm-hmm. And really, like you said, though, Zach, not much in the last 10 years because in the last 10 years, they've qualified in 2012 and in 2015 for the Calder Cup playoffs.
The Monarchs went on to win that year too, didn't they?
Yeah, it was their swan song that season, if I remember right. That was the last year before they moved to Ontario.
You are exactly right, and they won that against anybody?
Ooh.
Not Worcester, no.
No, not Worcester.
I should know this.
I remember that because the Bears beat Worcester, and that was their swan song as well in 2015. Gosh, I don't remember.
Mid-episode bonus round right here.
Oh.
God.
It was the Utica Comets.
No wonder I couldn't think of it. I was thinking to myself, it's somebody that switched sides of the fence there. I couldn't remember.
Okay. Well, the more you know, I guess.
Hey, there it is, right? But I mean, looking at who I've got here and who's hot and who's not. I mean, last year we had a dynamic duo between the NHL and the AHL with Calgary and Stockton. Both of them seemed poised to make deep runs at their respective Holy Grails. And this year, all signs seem to be pointing toward Boston and Providence. So Providence is hot right now. So are the Bruins up in the NHL. Providence has points in their last 6, going 5-0-1. Vinny Lettieri, Fabian Lysell, and Georgi Merkulov are all playing at point-per-game paces, while Kyle Kaiser has been lights out. He's posted a 4-0-1 record in 6 games played. Has a 187 goals against average and a 931 save percentage. It looks like the Bruins, and they mean business. It's looking like it could be their year to really control pace in the Atlantic for sure.
I've gotten to watch a good amount of Providence with them seemingly playing Springfield every other game here of late. The upper Atlantic teams going at it. 3 of those games that they've won or gotten points in were shootout games. Or overtime games, I believe. It went beyond extra time. But the biggest key for them is that Kyle Kaiser got hurt recently. So we have to wonder. I'm trying to think of his last name is Busey, I believe. He was a college goaltender, made his debut last season. He kind of had to step in and take the reins, I believe, just over halfway through the first period in their last game. That's my big question mark, is that he seems like he's pretty good. But is it going to be enough? I mean, Kyle Kaiser is Kyle Kaiser. You don't get too many goaltenders quite like that, like him in the AHL anymore. So, that's my big question for them. But they've been fantastic. And, Providence is one of those teams, they're always seemingly right up there in the top of the Atlantic. They're always a threat. They're always, able to steal points against teams. Springfield surrendered numerous leads to the Bruins because they just don't ever quit, and it's a very impressive feat that they have there.
Without a doubt. And Boosie is a product of West Michigan. He's a Western Michigan graduate. Yeah. So made a deep run with the Broncos there in the NCAA Frozen Four last year. And so let's see what he can do in Providence. But in terms of who's not hot, so what's going on with the Rocket? Normally Rockets are hot. This Rocket, not so much. So Laval obviously has quickly fallen from the grace of the Eastern Conference Finals last season and into the cellar of the North Division, courtesy of some really rough defense and goaltending. Their 43 goals against to this point are the most in the league. And the penalty kill, folks, is operating at a whopping 69.8%. Now, for what it's worth, that's not the worst in the North. Cleveland's operating at a 69% penalty kill rate. So not so nice going on there in Cleveland. But let me tell you, the Rocket have certainly earned this 4-game losing streak that they're on right now.
I don't think they've won a game at home yet, have they either?
That sounds right.
So there you go. It's tough. And you know what? It's a hot North Division, right? Belleville's doing okay. Toronto's doing way farther than expectations. I mean, here we are.
It's a really competitive division. They're kind of tearing each other up in some ways. And if you're the Rocket, you really don't want to find yourself on the outside looking in too early in this.
And I think we talked about this in episode 1 too. Like there's so much going on in Montreal that, they kind of got lost in translation, right? Like Montreal's depending so much on their farm team because they're having issues of their own and they had a massive player stock leave. So when you kind of get that, that's where you kind of have the problems. In my heart or not, I've been teeing it up a little bit, but you got to give me Toronto on this. There's no doubt about it. I got to write this down. I had to write this down. So wins in their past 6 games. Adam Gaudette has 6 goals and in 4 games played. Simeon Dargitsiev, I definitely butchered that, but thank you. With 6 assists through 6 games, so they both have streaks going. Logan Shaw, we talked about him earlier, 5 goals, 4 assists in 3 games for 9 points. Second best goals in the AHL after last weekend. And I mean, need I go on? I mean, they're just so good right now. They're going to go against Grand Rapids, who they really struggled against in their last series, but I think that there's been a lot of improvement since that as well. Dylan Ferguson has been a little shaky in net, as he should be. He doesn't really have that experience, so we'll see what happens with them coming into this weekend. Who's not for me? You know what? It'd be easy to pick on Henderson right now, but I got to go with San Jose. And you know what? I'm calling it here. They've lost 5 games in a row heading into Wednesday. They have not won at home through those 3 games. 29th overall power play, which is surprising because they have the best penalty kill. And the third period, they just give up. I mean, only 3 goals scored in the third period this whole year. I mean, what are you doing? And that's the worst by a country mile. And never mind 30th overall in goals for. I mean, not the San Jose team that we saw in the first 2 weeks. And you know what? They really got to start picking up the slack because you know what? It'll be a team like Ontario who will run you over, right? And there's so many teams on the boat of the Pacific Division this year. You don't want to get caught down the cellar.
No, definitely not. And there's a lot of good competition in the Pacific again. I mean, I don't know that it's going to be as top heavy as it was last year. I mean, that was a really, really crazy top of that division. But it's going to be hard if they return to their old CUDA ways. It's going to be hard for them to claw on back. And so here's hoping they can find a way to do that. And it wouldn't be, the Holy Grail unless we talked about the race to the Holy Grail, of course. So, things are spicing up. It feels like now we can start to look at some of these standings. We can start to kind of like piece some things together, as opposed to the first couple of episodes this season where you're looking at it and it doesn't really mean much. It's a couple games separation between every team, but we're starting to see some things take shape a little bit more in each of these divisions. So, Corey, how are things shaping up right now in the Atlantic?
Well, like you said, I actually took the words right from me on there. That the contenders, the pretenders and the contenders are kind of showing themselves out here a little bit so far. And we already touched on two of them with Providence and Bridgeport, who are 1 and 2 in the Atlantic Division, respectively. Wilkes-Barre kind of cooled off a little bit. They lost a couple of close games to Hershey over the weekend. Hershey's right there with Wilkes-Barre, as a result of that. You talk about early point swings in some of these games, and, Hershey's got 5 out of 6 against Wilkes-Barre to this point, with an overtime loss stretched in there as well. So, Hershey's kind of pulling up, back to maybe where we thought they were going to be after some early struggles here. They're not out of I'm losing my train of thought as I say this. So, of course, they're not. They have some problems they need to address. We talked about that, and you can look at Field Pass Hockey for a little bit more on their struggles as of their last game on this past Sunday. But, you got teams, and the teams that have fallen hard. It's Lehigh Valley and Hartford. We talked a little bit about Hartford earlier. But, neither of those teams are collecting points. It's a lot of, I know Lehigh Valley was north of the border this past week for a couple of games, but with so much interdivisional play, somebody's bound to get cannibalized a little bit here. And so far it's been Lehigh Valley for sure. So, you got a couple stragglers in there. Charlotte's kind of fallen off just a teeny bit from, being that once unbeaten team we were talking about a couple of weeks ago. They're down to 5th place. Springfield, just hasn't found their footing quite yet. It's been very average. They lost a bunch of games. They've won a bunch of games. In that sense, they're just like St. Louis in a lot of ways, if there's any Blues listeners out there to the podcast here. Not quite that bad, thankfully, for Springfield, but, it takes a little skill to be as bad as St. Louis has been recently. But, like you said, there's a lot of teams. I think it's shaping up to be a really good race from, I would probably say, the top 6 on for that, and it's just perfect for the playoff format, too.
Yeah, without a doubt. And as you look at the North, I mean, Zach kind of touched on it earlier, but the Marlies have really kind of been separating themselves from the rest of the pack. They've been lights out, and they lead the North Division by a margin of 4 points. But it feels like it's going to be a little bit of a cannibalistic division this year. It seems like this is going to be, the points are going to get stolen from one another quite frequently, and that's pretty evident in the fact that as we record this episode, a majority of the teams in the North are below 500. I think it's only the top 3 teams in the division are currently sitting at or above 500, and so that's, Toronto, Rochester, and Cleveland sitting at 500, and so, Not to fret too much, though. You've got the Comets, the Crunch, and the Rocket. They're all tied at the bottom of the division with 7 points, but the Comets have played 8 games, so they're definitely a little behind with that, postponement that happened earlier in the season and things like that. So they're still playing catch up a little bit, but it's going to be a really interesting North. I don't think it's going to be the same as it was last year, in the sense that it's like you've got a bunch of contenders in that division that look really strong. It seems like it's going to be a little cannibalistic, and I'm, for one, looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing with the points percentage system. It's kind of loosened that degree of separation a little bit, because I felt like the margin of error was so tight. Looking at the Central Division, things are still pretty tight with 5 points of separation between the top and the bottom. I mean, Milwaukee sits at the top, but Manitoba has been up there as well with a pretty tight points percentage. Just going down the list, I kind of see some good, solid points from Texas, who's kind of really made up ground. Up and down the list, Milwaukee, Manitoba, Texas, Grand Rapids, Chicago, and Rockford and Iowa just can't seem to get themselves, at that 500, out of that 500 race, and that's a 4-way tie at the bottom. And if you go by points percentage, who are all, 3-3, 4-4, 4-4, 5-5, right, with those bottom 4 teams in Grand Rapids, Chicago, and Rockford. As I switch gears over to the Pacific Division, it's only 2 teams have lost games less than 3 times. And that right there is Ontario and Tucson, who are kind of leading 1 and 2 right now. Going down the list, Ontario has a stunning 7-2 record. and Tucson's just following behind with 6-2. In the middle, we have Bakersfield, Coachella Valley, Calgary, Colorado, and Abbotsford. And in the bottom three, things just haven't been going right for San Jose in the past couple of games. Like I mentioned, they lost the last 5 of 9. San Diego just can't get their footing again this year, 3-7 record through their past 10. And then there's the Henderson Silver Knights, which I feel would be easy to pick on, 2-9. And if you're going by points percentage from last year, that's definitely worse than what we've ever seen, with a .18 percentage. So they win 18% of their games. So I guess you have an 18 out of 100 chance of going to see them win a hockey game.
Good stuff there from Zach doing double duty in the West. So obviously, things are picking up. We've got some games that mean a little bit more than they might have a couple weeks ago. And so, Corey, which game are you tuning into this week?
Well, people are going to call me beat bias on this one, but I have to throw it, and I have a good reason for it, to the set of games this weekend between the Hershey Bears and the Bridgeport Islanders. We talked about Bridgeport being a pretty strong team, especially with scoring, with their 40 goals here so far. But we're not talking enough about Hershey, who is tied for the second fewest goals allowed in the AHL with 2 other teams. Only the Wilkes-Barre Penguins have allowed fewer goals at 19. And the Bears just beat them 2 times this past weekend, coincidentally, by playing pretty good defense on Friday's game, and then, I should say Saturday's game, and then Sunday's game, it was a little bit less than in the third period there for sure. But it's going to be a battle between a defensive juggernaut and an offensive juggernaut, and the Bears' goal scoring just quite hasn't been up to the level of what Bridgeport has. But I would take Hershey in this matchup purely just because I think the Bears bring a more complete game. I mean, you can win games by simply filling the net more times than your opponent, but oftentimes it's, getting some clutch saves and some clutch play. Obviously we're still early enough to the point where some of these statistics, are not indicative of an entire team. We'd be telling a different story here past the January, February mark a little bit, but early season money to me has the Bears in this one, just because I think that they bring a little bit more of a complete game. But if they play every game like Coach Todd Nelson disliked on Sunday, where they played 40 minutes, were warned about Wilkes-Barre coming on, and subsequently were holding on to dear life, outshot 20-3 in the third period and allowing 3 goals, it's not a recipe for success either. So it's going to be a good test for both teams as an early season measuring stick, in my opinion.
Yeah, without a doubt, that'll be a fun game to watch. And for me, you kind of alluded to it earlier, Zach. I think Toronto and Grand Rapids could be a lot of fun to watch. Toronto has been playing lights out over the course of the last 6 games. Grand Rapids has struggled to find really consistent good goaltending. And so it could be one of those 2 things. It could be a barn burner, or it could be, like you mentioned, it could have remnants of the last time these teams met. And so it's going to be fun to watch this one. Still unsure if I think Andrew's coming by for that one. So another reason that's my game of the week is he's going to be in the lovely furniture city of Grand Rapids. And so I'm pretty excited about that one personally, but it's going to be a fun one to watch.
Sure. I don't know. We'll have to figure it out. If not, we will have coverage. I will do it. I'll be watching anyways. So, we'll see what happens. But, for me, we got some Canadiana in the north and central. Sorry, it should be the north. Between the Pacific and the Central Division. I'd love a North Division of all Canadian teams. And that's between Calgary and Manitoba. You know what? I don't think that Stockton ever was able to get to Manitoba last year. So it's definitely an interesting combo. You know what? Manitoba, they've kind of been the beast that we kind of lie on a lot, right? Like these, they've been stuck behind so many good teams in the past couple of years that, we don't recognize how good they are. And we talked about it before when we were doing the wheel. And I think we talked a little bit off air. Manitoba has such a complete team where everybody's able to pitch in. And that's why this makes it so interesting. I talked about the struggles last week of Calgary. They seem to get themselves back on the horse. But you know what? I'm curious to see what they have, and we'll see what that has in store this weekend.
Yeah, and if you're looking for a little bit of free hockey as well, we have another North Division matchup that may be for you between the Utica Comets and the Laval Rocket coming up this Friday, November 11th at 7 o'clock Eastern. Zach, you probably know a little bit more about this than me, but Utica and Laval are both struggling. They both have 7 points, and they're both kind of looking to insert them into that conversation, in the 1-2-3 slot here. And, tie themselves up with Belleville a little bit, but Utica obviously has a little bit of the more edge in this one. They played 2 last games and have the same amount of points as Laval. I'm not sure there's a clear-cut favorite here, though.
You know what? It's truly split down the middle. Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting schedule there for sure. Speaking of an interesting schedule, also we have live AHL action on the Field Pass Hockey app. Got to get them dollar bills, right? Talked about it last episode, but we got it here on the Field Pass Hockey app. This week's matchups are between the Charlotte Checkers and the Providence Bruins on Friday at 7 Eastern Time. Saturdays at 7:30, and we'll be live from Hartford, Connecticut for that game. And then that's between the Checkers and the Wolfpack. And finally, we're back on Sunday. 3 games this weekend, folks. 3 games. And that's for our triple weekend at 3 Eastern. You can check out the Providence Bruins and the Charlotte Checkers, and that's on the Field Pass Hockey app. And you can find that on the Google Play Android store as well as the Apple iTunes store.
If you miss any of those matchups, you can't say it was our fault. That's all I have to say. That is all I have to say. But Zach, my friend, I know you had mentioned that maybe you'd be our pinch hitter tonight.
I sure do.
For a little bit of
fancy animation.
That's when I figure out that I need to overcompensate for the fact that I also forgot to throw in a little bit of the race for the Holy Grail earlier and a little bit of our.
We gotta get cycle all through them now. We gotta use them. They gotta be used. Yeah, keep going.
The game of the week, boys.
Anybody on YouTube is just merely I hope you have sound on YouTube, because if you don't, you're probably really confused.
Nonetheless. Yeah. Without a doubt.
So y'all know that I'm big in the Canadiana, right? And I got a simple question, and we'll do the whoever's closest. It's not Price is Right rules. How many Canadian players were on last year's Calder Cup team? On the Chicago Wolves.
Oh my God. I'm just trying to think of it's hard because they all left too. So it's like I'm trying to think of
this is the other side of it too, is I kind of gave it to anybody who kind of had a role in there who did play on that season.
Okay.
Oh, that's even harder.
I know.
Man.
So this is like throughout the whole season then. We're not talking like the roster. Oh hell. I'm going to go lucky number 13. That's just like where I'm going to stick it, and I'm going to hope for the best.
Oh man, I had a little bit more than that. I was thinking in the realm of like 18.
Wow, okay. There was 24 players this year on the Chicago Wolves. You got to think too. They also have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 goalies who suited up for them at one point or another.
Oh, that's a really fair
That's
point.
it.
That certainly doesn't help. Ontario, BC is on the list. Lots of Ontario, Quebec, and more BC. A lot of Ontario, and Summerside PEI was the odd one out. But yeah, it was mostly Ontario, which we do see a lot in the NHL. If you actually go back 10 years ago to the Norfolk Admirals, which was going to be our bonus question, they actually had 22 players suit up for them. So that was in 2012.
Wow. Good stuff. Good stuff from the Canadian. Our resident Canadian, Zach, who's sitting at work with the poppies. Like, you're just absolutely giving the most Canadiana right now.
And you know what? Do take 2 minutes, folks. It's a pittance of time. Really do. Go out, support your veterans, get your poppies if you can. They'll be kicking around most grocery stores, at least in Canada, until the 11th. And head over to a ceremony. It's a stat holiday.
Yes, absolutely. Go get those if you are in Canada, and if you're in the States, be sure to do the same on Veterans Day. It's coming up as well. So, as we wrap things up, folks, a little bit of a quicker one. Not too much major news here in the AHL this week, but obviously great to be with you all once again, as we often are. So that's going to be it for us this week. If you like what you hear here, make sure that you subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Also, make sure that you follow us on Twitter at The Holy Grail, and you know how we spell it. That's at The Holy, GrAHL. And you can follow us all on, you can follow our other Field Pass Hockey podcasts. We've got quite a few. We've got Inside the SPHL with James Hayes, Syracuse Speaks with Alexander Ackerman. Syracuse Speaks is a Syracuse Crunch-centric podcast that focuses on maintaining a balanced perspective in the ever-shifting world of minor league hockey. We've got the 3 Periods podcast with Matt Harding. And on behalf of all of us here at the Holy Grail, we hope that you all have an amazing week, and we will see you next Thursday. Bye.
This has been the Holy Grail Podcast. Have a question or topic suggestion? Hit us up on Twitter or drop us an email. For the latest news across the American Hockey League and the rest of minor league hockey, download the Field Pass Hockey app, now available in the Apple and Android app stores.
Yeah.